They all look very, very copy and paste. Like they somebody made one and they clicked like the mailing list of however many students and just sent it to everybody. Like it looks so there's just nothing personal about it at all. And every time I open something that like catches my eye and I'm like, "Ooh, what is this? This looks somewhat interesting." And then I open it and I'm like, "Oh, no, it's not. Why did I have faith this time? Like, did I really think it was going to be different? I don't know why." Like I don't think I've ever opened an email and been like impressed.
Welcome to Mission Admissions, a podcast that helps higher ed become better recruiters, communicators, marketers, and leaders. I'm your host, Jeremy Tiers, and every other week I'll share my candid conversations with industry leaders and difference makers from both inside and outside of higher ed. You'll walk away with advice, tips, and strategies to help you both professionally and personally. Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. You can learn more at element451.com. Hey everybody, it's Jeremy Tiers and this is episode 63 of the Mission Admissions podcast. Last August, I had Mickey Baines and his son Reece, who at the time was about to start his junior year in high school in Pennsylvania on. And we just talked about the college search process from both the current student and parent point of view, as they were just really starting to dive into taking a bunch of campus visits and trying to figure out the early stages of things. Fast forward, and we're now 7 months later, and I'm excited to have both of them on again today. We're going to talk a lot about how Reece has been able to narrow down his list, kind of where things are at, and what some of the things are that not only he's thinking about, that dad and the rest of the family are thinking about as well. So welcome back to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So Reece, the list got up to 40 if I have my information correct, meaning throughout this process, there were, a little over 40 schools that you said, okay, like there's something there that interests me about those schools. I want to learn more. And you've been able to narrow that 40 down to less than 10. And I also hear 10 maybe closer to 5. And so what I would love to know right off the bat from you, Reece, is how did you ultimately figure out how we were going to get from 40 to whatever number we went to and now to ultimately, just a handful of schools?
It was a lot of research just about everything about the schools. We had to check out like their programs specifically for what I'm interested in, which has shifted since last time I was here. So I'm more interested in communications and political science now. So it's a lot of researching how's their communications program, how's their political science program. Price, definitely more of a factor thinking about it than it was before in my head. A lot about the food too, because I have to be gluten free. So I have to, if the places don't really have much for me to eat, then it's probably not a place I should go. Just a lot of research.
So I would be curious to know then, and Reece, I'll start with you, and then Mickey, I would love to get your take on this as well. You mentioned price there.
Yes.
I feel like obviously most high school students, when they go through this process, Reece, they just aren't as mindful. They know college isn't free basically, and they understand there's like going to be a cost associated with it. But I feel like, and this is what students tell us all the time in surveys, well, that's kind of like a conversation for my parents. And so what is it that has allowed you to say, okay, like I know I need to be a part of the conversation when it comes to like cost and paying for college? And if you're comfortable sharing, what are some of those things related to those topics that you and your parents have been talking about?
What got me thinking about it more was ultimately I'm the one going to college, so it is really my responsibility to pay for. and it's however much like my parents are willing to help me. And that's kind of how I view it. And I don't know, we haven't talked about it a ton,
Yeah.
but my mom has at least said that however much they can help me pay, they will.
I didn't want him thinking about cost to get it to this point. Like, I want to find the right schools, not a singular school, a set of them. And then from there, let's figure out what we can afford. And at some point around this time next year, we'll have an idea if there's some type of scholarship associated that he will earn, or if there's any other type of aid that's available. And then we can say, okay, this is how much we can help or not. And then he can make some decisions. My wife and I together did not really want him to exclude any institutions just because it felt like it was too expensive. Um, Not that we can afford any of them. And we've got an institution on the list that is $80,000 for tuition, room, and board. And I can tell you, when you look at what the government subsidized and unsubsidized loans are for him as a first year student, when you take that out, what's left, we cannot afford. Like, that's just, we don't have that kind of money sitting around, which very few families do. But I don't want to say, no, that school's off the list until we have a better real idea of what that total cost is going to look like. And then we can figure it out. Reese isn't our only child. We've got another child that's 5 years behind. So there hopefully won't be a period where we've got a lot of overlap of two kids enrolled at one time. But there's only so many times you can put another mortgage on the house, right? So you have to think about that and the cost. But I don't want that in his mind. I don't want him to, at this point, carry that pressure or that thought, because it's a long time. Like, we won't be making a decision, or he won't be making a decision for a year. I don't want him carrying the burden of, how am I going to, what am I doing to my parents, and how am I going to afford this for that long? Let's find the right mix of schools that fit all the other criteria, and then we can work on the price piece.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. And it's an important point because what we all know is you don't know what the cost is for
Yeah.
any student until they actually literally apply, get accepted, fill out financial aid paperwork, figure out what scholarships are going to be eligible, loans, all of that.
Yep.
And so at the end of the day, I would be curious to know, Reese, then, all right, so take your top schools. And again, I'm not asking for any names, but like, your dad said one of them obviously costs a lot more than the rest. I would be curious to know if there is some overlap, meaning, okay, if I can ask you some specifics, is it a mix of private and public schools? Are they all around the same size, or are some small and some big? Like, help me understand if there's overlap there, or if you've kind of got a mix of all of different schools there, Reese.
There's a pretty good mix of private and public schools. The price is like all over the place for them. Most of the schools that I'm still looking at are bigger, but there are still like a few smaller schools on the list.
And when we say small, though, let's keep that relatively. I can jump in there because, Jeremy, you and I know institutions will say what he thinks of as small, may not what everyone listening thinks of as small. So the smallest school on there has about 5,000 students, right? The largest one has 40 something thousand undergraduates. So large mix in between.
What is it? I am curious, Reese, if there is anything. What does stick out as like all right, Jeremy, if I had to tell you there's a common theme between I kind of like this and multiple schools have this besides your major and the program you're interested in, what are those things? Anything top of mind?
I just like student life when there's a lot of things to do. I don't I like when I go to a school and I see like, oh, there's no way I could be bored here. There's always something I could be doing. That that draws me in a lot.
What's been the hardest part to this point for you, Dad?
I wouldn't say anything's been like particularly hard. I think what we had more schools on the list than most, right? So it was big to begin with. But um, as his academic interests has shifted a little bit, now you've got to take steps back. And so if you go from 40 to 20 or some odd 22 or whatever to visit, and then you're going to narrow that down to 10, and now the academic interest shift, now you have to take a few steps back. Now let's look at where we are on the list to say, do these programs still fit and align? And have we excluded any that we might should bring back to the list because an academic shift has changed? And um, but you don't want that process because like, oh, I got to do this again. I don't want him to feel that because this is his decision ultimately. It's his future that's on the line with this, and so I don't want to that work to really impact his thought process on it. But we also want to be sure that we're not now missing a school because political science or potentially pre-law or something like that could be of interest.
All right, Reece, then I would be curious to know because the first time we talked, it was clear that you were like, okay, my parents are going to help me with this, but I know this is my college search. And so I'm going to take some level of ownership of this. Do you feel like the level of ownership has changed at all the last 6 or 7 months? Or do you kind of feel like, no, my parents are kind of still guiding me. I'm still making sure they understand my point of view. Or do you find yourself kind of, we'll say, leading the conversation more?
Um, I think it stayed pretty much the same, where I've had a lot of guidance and help from like my mom does a lot of the research. She has her notebook that's just like completely filled with everything. And I really appreciate that. And I take all of that into account and then I form my own opinions based on what I get to see on the tours. So I'd say it's a balance of how much is just in my head and how much my parents like tell me.
I
And
think we've probably, and I say we, my wife is, as he mentions, really the key. This has removed a lot of the distractions or filtered the information enough so he has a pertinent set of information to consider, um, to help drive the process. I would say he and my wife together are driving it probably together. I don't, and you can correct me in this, but I don't think anyone's pushing him in any direction. But we're saying, okay, here we're listening to what he's saying and using that to say, okay, here are some options. Here's what we see. You read about this, think about this, and then if you're interested, we'll go visit that school. And that's kind of been the process. So it's really been, I would say, a shared process.
One of the things you said, Mickey, the first time we were on that I found to be most impactful, especially in the work I do, and I've shared it, I don't know how many times, when I'm leading training workshops for admissions teams, is I asked you about parents, specific to the campus visit process. And you said, Jeremy, parents aren't an afterthought and they aren't given a thought whatsoever. And so
Yeah.
I'm curious to know as you've again started to, and we're going to unpack some of these emails. I know Reece has received hundreds of them over the last 7 months, but how much again communication, so take the visit part out of it, Mickey, have you and your wife received specifically for parents in this process?
Not any more than we received last time. So there's still only a handful of schools that communicate directly with us. We use my personal email address and all of the anytime when it asks for parent information, which is most of the time. And I think pretty much every school we visited, when you're signing up for a campus tour, it will ask for parental information. And I don't can't recall any that did not. And so any of those that we filled out has had my email address in it. And there are very few institutions, still I would say no more than 6 or 7, that communicate with us. And all but 1 or 2, when they communicate with us, is just sending us the same a carbon copy of the email that he received. And so 1 or 2 of them will be a written for us, but not necessarily personalized for us as parents of Reece. It's you are a parent of a prospective student in this particular interest, academic interest. Here's a message that might be related to you. I mean, it might do a personalization token with my first name on it, but the rest of the content is nothing that's personalized for us. And to their credit, most schools aren't doing a heck of a lot more than that to personalize for him. So why would they do that for us? But when you look at, again, we're doing more than probably a lot of families are, but the shared involvement between him and us, I would think, is similar in other families. And a lot of our familiar friends who have kids his age that are going through it, they're, I would say, almost as involved as we are, or often asking me or my wife questions as their kids are going through the process. And so, that there's a great, just a huge opportunity that's still being missed
you're spot on, and the data continues. We have a question that has been on surveys we do with students, and typically we're talking with them in the late stages, meaning they've just recently made their college decision, or at most they're a few months into their first year of college, and we're asking them questions while it's fresh, and we'll be like, what are all the things your parents or guardians helped you with during your college search? Like, check as many of these as you want. Now, one of the boxes is they didn't help me with anything. I did everything on my own. Less than 12% of students check that box, right? And I know I've got a good sample size of different parts of the country, different backgrounds, different types of students. It's amazing to see, again, just how much obviously parents do help with. I mean, the top two things, which have been the top two things the entire time, figuring out financial aid and planning campus visits.
Yep.
All right. So, Reece, you've received a lot of emails, right?
Yeah.
Dad said north of 400 to this point, and more than even 70 just over the last couple of weeks here in March when we're recording this. I find it interesting, but not surprising, right? That you've only opened literally, right, a
I
handful,
counted them. I don't know if you know this.
right?
Did you
So
Yeah.
I
count
go
them?
and look at his email to see which is open and which isn't, and to see their phone. So when I share those numbers, I'm going to do the counts myself. He doesn't always know what I'm doing. That. So it was, I think the number is 70 as of Monday, in the month of March. 70 emails, and you'd open 6.
Yep.
And
Sounds
so
good.
I'm curious, Reece. We ask students, and I want to get your take on a couple of things here. All right, what's the preferred way you want to be communicated with right now at this point in your junior year? So, how would you answer that question? What's the main medium you want to talk to colleges through?
Well, if it's a college that I'm interested in, then email or text message. But if it's one that like got my information from College Board or something, then I really would not like them to text me.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Only
that
email.
matches with all the data we see, right? Which is email is almost always the preferred medium of communication, mainly because a lot of times students will tell us, well, I'll call it's kind of like a safe communication, meaning I don't really have to respond. Colleges, like don't expect me to because they just texted me and they know I'm sitting there on my phone. And then ultimately, we hear with text messaging, a large majority are like, until I've either at worst visited, but in many cases applied or been admitted, please don't text me, even if you're a school that I'm,
Yeah.
strongly considering. So then you've received all of these emails. You're telling me, hey, if I have to pick, it's probably email. What is it that colleges could do? Because your dad's already hit on the fact that, listen, most of what he's getting is not personalized. What could colleges do in your mind that would get you to open more emails?
They all look very, very copy and paste. Like they somebody made one and they clicked like the mailing list of however many students and just sent it to everybody. Like it looks so there's just nothing personal about it at all. And every time I open something that like catches my eye and I'm like, "Ooh, what is this? This looks somewhat interesting." And then I open it and I'm like, "Oh, no, it's not. Why did I have faith this time? Like did I really think it was going to be different? I don't know why." Like I don't think I've ever opened an email and been like impressed. Only disappointed pretty much cuz it just they all look the exact same. Like I probably I don't even remember what schools I opened. They all look the same. Every
There's
single email.
Well, and
there's one.
define,
Go
before you
ahead.
jump in, Mickey,
Yeah.
define what looks the same, because I think what you mean, but I'd love for the audience to hear. Be more specific, Reese, about what looks the same means.
Just about everything looks exactly the same. The thing at the top that's like a banner for their school, the same format of like broken up paragraphs that I'm not going to read because I'm it's an email. I want it to be short and to the point, not split up into paragraphs. I wanted to read an email, not an essay. And they all say roughly the same thing with my name at the top. Hi, Reese. And then it just goes on about whatever they're trying to get me to do.
Like your dad said, one of the emails you opened recently, and Mickey, I saw your LinkedIn tweet or post, right, was 3 quick tips to build your college list.
Yes,
I don't
that
know if
was
you
what I was going to
remember
mention
that
just a second
message,
ago. Yep.
Reese, but like, what was it? Was it the subject line and you were like, ooh, that actually sounds like something I feel like I need at this point? Or like, help us understand.
I was curious about that. I was like, "Ooh, what's that? What's
Mhm.
that like?" Because it wasn't the exact same subject line as everything else, so that looked interesting. And I don't remember what it said, but I it actually looked worth opening up. So
And this is what I was saying in that post. The difference in that email and every other email that he's received this month was that that email was for him, not for the school. Because all the other ones are the school saying, "Look at me, we are awesome." And that one email said, "Here's something that will help you in your college search." That's the difference.
All right, Reece, do you know the name of any admissions counselor at any school you've talked to in this entire process? Like, do you remember any of the names? You don't have to say them, but do you remember any of the names?
If I think really hard, I might be able to remember one.
And is
But I
that school on the list still, or is that not a school that's on the list?
No, it's on the list. I remember because I met with the admissions counselor at school, and that was like 2 weeks ago.
If you got an email from that counselor that said that was a subject line along the lines of, and it's from him, not that
Mhm.
school, difference between our campus and a small college university. Would you read that because it's from him?
Yeah, I would read it if it was from him because I actually have an
Because you
established relationship.
and it's established relationship and established level of trust
Yeah.
because they've already come in demonstrating a clearer sense of objectivity and of a care more about his choice, not their institution that they represent.
It is such a important but nuanced point that I hope schools are listening and taking away, which is when you build some level of trust with any of us, I would argue, Mickey, tell me if I'm wrong. Same thing with you and your wife, right? If a school from point one is making you feel like a valued partner, you're that much more likely, I assume, to engage with them when they do ask your point of view, right?
Yep. It and if they send me those same topics, I'm as a parent am more likely to read it than he's going to be, even if it's not as neutral as what he's looking for. I'm more interested in that sometimes, and I'm thinking more reflectively about size and the value of a small campus versus large campus than he might be. And so I think there's always that piece. But it also then, if we think about that relationship and the trust piece, then what's in my mind right now is, well, that three tips email, whatever, to narrow your search. If we did more of that early on, then all the other junk that kids are ignoring, because once he's ignored three, he's not going to just want to open four or five. He's already tuned you out, and so you have to work even harder to regain some level of trust. And it's not necessarily schools that he's not visited. There are schools he's not paying attention to that he's visited. That send. I mean, the majority of the emails still are from schools he's visited. They don't know where they stand on his list because there's some that will email. There's two in particular, one that's on the list still, and one that's not really on the list still. That probably send, I don't know, somewhere between 2 and 5 emails each per month. They just boom, boom, just something after something, and it's not. He's already tuned them out. It's so hard to get it back, and the longer you wait to get it back, the more different you have to be to get it back. Because I was looking, you've not opened from either of those schools an email in a long time, and one of them sends emails from people, not from the school. It's one of the very few schools that do it, but he's still not necessarily opening those because they've already lost it. The trust.
Yeah, it's such an important piece, and trust, none of us give it away easily, right? And so,
Yeah,
we're all skeptical. It's how we are as humans, and there's not anything wrong with that, right? But it is such an important point, to really relook at those
yeah,
first touch points that you have, not just with juniors, obviously, right? But even sophomores and freshmen, because I know obviously sophomores and freshmen, there are a handful of them as well who start the process earlier. So, Reece, if you're comfortable sharing, like, what do you and your friends talk about at this point when it comes to the college stuff?
We usually don't talk about college stuff much. It's usually a short conversation like, "Where are you thinking about?" "Oh, here." "Oh, me too. I looked there."
hmm,
It's usually a pretty short conversation. Maybe price a little bit. Like, "Oh, I'd love to go here, but it's so expensive." Or that's how most of the conversations go, I'd say.
You guys
There's
talk
not.
about AI at all in this whole process?
No, but I'm not a fan of it personally.
Why not?
It just feels so lazy. Like you
hmm.
couldn't even have a person write this mass email out. Like I know you're not personalizing it to begin with, and you're writing one, but now a person can't even do it. You have to hand it to a robot to do it for you. Like it just feels really lazy.
So if I'm hearing you right, are you telling me that if you found out, let's just say, one or more of the schools that you're still considering was using AI to either help them write emails, or let's just say they had AI personas that were actually, you know, writing the emails and or making, for example, phone calls, right, on behalf of the school or sending text messages, like you would be less trusting of the school?
Not necessarily of the school. I would be like disappointed. Like seriously, that's what you're doing. It wouldn't really. None of that really changes my opinion of the school because all of the schools seem to be about the same with that, at least in what I've seen. So I don't really judge a school too much off of their emails because it's a very separate thing in my head, at least.
And I don't know about your experience, Jeremy. I don't. So here's the rub. I don't think that many schools are actually yet using AI for their content, but they write it so poorly. He perceives it to be written by AI. I want the schools to think about that. That you're not using AI, but it's so bad they think it is written by AI. And it's not that AI writes all bad stuff because AI can do good stuff. I've seen it. I've played with it, prompted it, and come up with some good stuff. But um, the perception we have is, oh, if it's AI generated, at least on its own, it's not going to be great. We got to do a lot of work to improve it. Um, and their perception is that a lot of them are using it because look at it. And if you're thinking about whether or not to use it, well, it can't get worse, can it? Because he already thinks it is pretty bad and that AI did it. So why not use AI, in my mind, to try to make it better?
Reese, what if you're comfortable sharing, what's the biggest thing you're stressing out about or like nervous about right now when you think about the college stuff?
How I'm gonna pay for it afterwards and how long I'll be paying for it afterwards.
Are you worried about getting in yet?
Not really. None of the schools that I'm like really interested in seem to be overly hard to get into. So I'm not too worried about getting in. We wrote college essays for school and I got a 92 on mine, so
Say
it couldn't
luckies.
have been bad.
Yeah.
So
We
I'll
did do
refine that.
an admissions calculator to assess the likelihood of getting accepted based on, so we filled out one of those applications and we did test all of his schools that are on the list to say, okay, what does it look like? And I think most of them, there are a couple that were like 50%, but a lot of them were 75 to 95% likely. And I guess some of them might say that a 95% would be a safety school, but there are some pretty good schools in there with very well ranked programs. So we would not call that a safety school in that sense because it's a very well ranked program. If it's a top 10 ranked program in the country, then I don't care if it's 2% or 98%. That's a target school for us.
Reese, I would be curious to know, last couple of things. What do you see then as kind of like the next steps in your process, in your opinion? Whether they match with what mom and dad have told you, because I don't know if you've had that discussion, but like, what do you see as the next steps in this process?
I'd like to revisit some of the schools that I looked at a while ago because it was a while ago, and I like to see them with students on campus. Because what does 45,000 students look like versus 20,000? Like, there's
Mm-hmm.
a big difference, and I want to actually see that because a lot of the schools I saw over the summer where there weren't any students there,
Mm-hmm.
so I'd like to see that. Um, Focus more on fine tuning my essay. I need to focus on that. Look at when I think they already are out, the essay prompts for Common App. Take a look at those, see how like what all I can write about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just start preparing to for admissions
One
more.
of the things that he's doing, you didn't mention, he's going to do a summer academic camp
Oh
at
yeah,
one of the schools that are still on the list. We're doing it over the summer that's related to his potential major and to kind of verify, I think, an academic alignment and interest in that subject. And so he'll be doing that as well. And I think for me, that's what I want him to do is something along those lines to kind of confirm this really is the direction I want academically. Um, so that if we're going to look at and weight so much on the academic quality of this institution being selected, that we know that that's really the focus of his academic interests. Not that it can't change after he enrolls, but you don't want to go to a top 5 communications program, change your major to English, and it's a top 3,000 English major, right? So we want to kind of look at those things as well as best we can.
And then, Mickey, what are you and your wife still trying to figure out about all this?
I would agree. We want to go back to some of those campuses, see what it's like in the fall for him, so he can experience that. And I think the one that probably matters the most right now is I would say the dietary piece. So he's going to be without us providing meals because none of the campuses we're looking at is within 2.5 hours of where he lives. So we're not going to be giving him food. And so how will he sustain himself with food in a way that is healthy for him and gives him options so that he's not going to a school that's like, here's the 3 cafeterias and over there in that corner are the 3 things that we have for those who have a gluten allergy, and those 3 things rotate, and it's a 5-day rotation that keeps the same thing. I want him to have options there, and so I think that matters a lot to us right now, and making sure that if you're on the list, that you've already crossed that threshold. So like there are campuses we go to that have, like allergen free pantries to go and get food, to take back, whether it's a takeout or just like a convenience store type things that are just for those with allergy. You have to swipe the card just to even get in the space. To those, yes, you've got gluten free sections in the cafeteria, but it's open handles and it's not too far away from something that's got gluten, and that could be dangerous. And that so looking at those things, I think that matters, that level of detail, because that they can tell us about, but you want to see that firsthand, and we only have a couple opportunities to see that before we have to make a real commitment, or before he's ready to make a full commitment to an institution. So I'd say that's probably a little bit more of interest to us. And then I just want to see how he responds when he's on campus visiting. So I feel like he feels good about it and is comfortable with it. To me, that matters most probably is seeing that. And then whatever those final 1 or 2 choices are, then I'll really let the worry of the cost set in.
Well, and that's where I would love to just finish up, Reece, because we've talked about, again, you're farther ahead, whether you realize it or not, right, than a lot of students who are juniors right now in your process, which, again, is totally fine. And you've obviously had the opportunity to visit a lot of schools, which I think is awesome. And I know is going to be super helpful when you get to, right, that time and have to make that ultimate decision. What advice, Reece, would you give to schools where a student doesn't, for example, for whatever the reason is, right? Cost, time, parent involvement, all of these things, to be able to take these visits that have been helpful for you when it comes to like saying, okay, then do colleges need to do a better job with like virtual stuff? Would that be helpful? Like, is there anything in terms of advice that you would give those schools where students maybe can't do a lot of the stuff you've been able to do or aren't as far along in the process in terms of like getting them the information as students that they need at this point?
I think more important than a virtual tour, because I don't think I know anybody that's ever done a virtual tour of anything. And I personally, maybe it's just me, but I wouldn't want to do that. I couldn't really explain to you why. It's just not something I'd want to do. But I think the information that you learn at a college tour, you still need to get that out to students or prospective students. Is very like valuable information. Maybe have a list of students that they could contact, like the tour guides, give their contact information out if they're comfortable with that, I guess. Um, you still want to provide the different perspective that isn't from the admissions office of the school. Like, that's what I think is like really important.
Well, I greatly appreciate you both being on today, and I'm just excited to continue to obviously see how your process goes, and hopefully look forward to having you both on the pod again, as we start to, get into some of the things that seniors obviously deal with when you're a senior. Does that sound like something you'd be open to doing, Reece?
Oh yeah, I would. Yes.
Awesome. Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a number of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admission professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Day Cabilds, and so many other amazing leaders in the higher ed space. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create more meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. You can learn more at element451.com.